College athletics is changing every single day, and the University of Louisville has gotten out in front of it this time. We are reacting to the white paper released by UofL and more on today's show. Go ahead and roll that music, baby. Welcome on in, welcome on in, welcome on in. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on when and where you are watching in from. This is your boys over the Cardinal Companion. It is me, as always, Josh, joined in by my lovely friend, Max. Max, how you doing tonight, babe?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Happy to talk a little bit of, ball-oriented things at least. So,
Yeah, the way I put this is we're going to do that thing on the show where we talk about things relating to college football without talking about anything on the field, and it's always one of my favorite conversations. It's dry as heck, I'll tell you right now, but I mean, it's good information to have. But kind of getting on into this, so before you watch this video, I would highly, highly encourage you to read the white paper from the arena, not the sideline. College athletics is running out of time. It was published today on March 2nd by the University of Louisville. It's by president of UofL, Dr. Bradley, Josh Hurd, the athletic director, along with Dr. Lawrence Benz, who's the chairman of the board of trustees. It'll be linked down below, so please make it a little easier for this video if you just kind of at least skimmed through it so you somewhat know or have some sort of reference on what we're talking about. But Max, did you get the chance to read the white paper?
I did, and it was something that I will say it's not something you can just casually scan or read over, like you're reading over the newspaper. It's something that I actually had to dive into it. I would say that, some of the things coming out of it, I'd say there's some worrisome things out of it, and then there's, I would say some light at the end of the tunnel things. So hopefully we'll see.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I love that U of L put this out because U of L has always been very much so they want to be in front of NIL. They want to be in front of the changing landscapes. You always hear U of L affiliated people say that. You see that in, press releases. You see that in On3 interviews, 247 interviews, all that. But truly, kind of just getting out there. Now, we have seen a few other universities do similar things, but majority of their thoughts on these issues come out through video content or just general board meetings. We haven't really seen a university kind of put pen to paper like this, which is so interesting from U of L to go this route.
Yeah, I mean, at least in my opinion, it's awesome to, I would say it's almost like a proud dad moment. See, the university that you support, that you're behind, get out on, topics that it's so weird because this is a topic that literally transcends, from sports into getting into politics. And there's so much around the landscape of NIL and sport and college athletics today. And, there's so many fingers that lead off of it, whether that goes into media and, the actual athletic other athletic programs and at schools and stuff. So it's something that really kind of affects so many different facets of life anymore.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we'll get right into it. And kind of the format we're going to go through this is the white page is 8 pages long. We will just kind of highlight each main topic and just kind of give our, what we believe the U of L was trying to convey along with kind of our sentiment. Heads up for you, me and Max, we're free thinkers. We don't agree with the U of L on every single thing in this. So yeah, we're not really playing the party line here very much. But I mean, beginning of the white papers, it's pretty cut and dry. It just kind of sets the stage for college athletics. And really the big thing that I take away from this is the University of Louisville generates $1.28 billion annually. But at the same time, they run a deficit of $12.5 million every single year. And, U of L, they highlight a few other universities kind of in the same ballpark as U of L with operating at a deficit like this. We're not talking about, Pittsburgh or Oklahoma State or, Stanford. We're not talking, we're talking about universities like Ohio State, Penn State. And that's not what you expect in these conversations, is to be talking about universities like that.
Yeah. And that's something that, I think there's this conception where, you look at the top 5, 10 programs, whatever it be, and, you just think that, nothing can hurt them. They're just bulletproof, invincible, sitting up there. And then, once you start actually looking into the numbers of it, it's, this isn't something that just affects Louisville. It's not something that just affects Middle Tennessee. And it's something that is affecting, college sport just as a whole. I didn't really get that until I actually started diving into that today.
Yeah.
Because I'll be completely honest, that the grass isn't like 100% greener, but when you think of, Ohio States and programs like that, you humbled me just as an overall sports fan a little bit on how dire this situation is getting.
Yeah. Then the next little part of the white page, we'll get into insight into the UofL athletic department. This little portion, I'll be honest, it's just kind of a fluff piece by UofL to say we care a lot about academics and academics should matter. There's not a lot of takeaways from this outside of that. Glad that the guys at UofL care about academics. Yeah, we got the important things. Anything to add on to that?
No, I think you kind of just hit it. I'm to the point, like, it would be weird if they didn't throw something like that in there. Like, because it's not just, this isn't a letter from just Josh Hurd, the athletic director. This is from, the highest points in the entire program.
Yeah.
I get it. So,
and then I guess really the next part is really where we can kind of get into a lot of meat and bones. And this is all like very UofL centric stuff. I think this is where a lot of takeaways from UofL fans are going to come from. But essentially talking about the economics behind the UofL athletic department. So, it starts off, the typical line that we always hear, there's not a major sports team within 100 miles of Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville, Kentucky, the University of Louisville are the pro sports teams in Louisville, which we've all heard that line for the past 30 years. And then UofL goes on and they further argue that this is not a UofL specific only thing. You have communities like Stillwater, Oklahoma, Orange, Kansas, similar situations to Louisville where these are the sports programs. And then what I think is really interesting that UofL does is they kind of take a shot here and they say, we understand that people on the coast don't care about college athletics, and it seems like people in Washington, D.C. don't either. But this is a very important topic, which I read that. I was like, Josh, you're getting a little spicy, baby. I was like, I like that from you.
Yeah.
Then it goes further on. It talks a little bit about UofL's athletics from the fiscal year of 23 to the fiscal year of 25. Louisville, they generated $3.84 billion in total economic impact, which averages out $1.28 billion per year in economic impact. What I will say for that is not just like, oh, UofL's making $1 billion, because they're not, but that is the overall impact that'll have on the community of Louisville, the state of Kentucky. It's all encompassing, which is very impressive, might I add. Then along with that, they further it up and they start talking about a little bit of broadcasting, whether that be through TV, digital, radio, streaming, all platforms that people get media. Louisville's brand delivered more than $2.3 billion in brand exposures. Put this in perspective, if that was a private brand that had the outreach that Louisville does and you wanted to use them as like a marketing agency, it would roughly be a $700 million marketing deal to get the same brand outreach that the University of Louisville has gotten. It goes on to talk more about a little bit of exactly how the University of Louisville makes money for the city of Louisville and the state of Kentucky and other states that UofL plays sports in, through travel, hotels, events, anything you could think of. That's how they make the money. On top of that, a very, very interesting little point here that I'd like to point out. The football team alone generates 60% of that economic impact. Just want to point that out because I feel like as Louisville fans, we lose sight of that. So along with that, though, they continue to talk about we give financial aid to students with this money and how great the University of Louisville is for the state of Kentucky. That essentially covers that topic right there. And again, it's just kind of putting numbers out there, but those numbers those are reflective of what we are dealing with here, how much money really is at stake. I mean, we're throwing around billions of dollars. My big key takeaway and what I pointed out earlier, 60% for football. I really feel like we lose sight of that a lot. Yes. Yeah, 1.8 billion per year on average.
Yeah. So at that point in time, you're talking, $75 or $750 million of money essentially brought in through football into the city.
Yeah.
That's the bar across the street from the stadium. That's the dude that's selling parking or letting you park in his yard. That's insane.
And might I add, there's a lot of people that would argue Louisville is not a football brand. To be fair, those numbers do not compare to the Alabamas and Ohio States of the world. I'm not arguing that at all. But what you think of Louisville football, think about that number And now try to imagine that maybe doubled or tripled when we start talking about the top of the sport. Like that is the amount of money that we are discussing here. It is not a small chunk of money. Further going down the list here, we start really getting to, we just highlighted a bunch about UofL, how UofL operates, how much money we're talking about for UofL. Now we're getting into the actual issue, the core of the issue, which is the financial crisis facing college athletics. So this is pretty cut and dry. UofL, they operate in the red in athletics with as much money as they generate per year. Most schools do operate in the red, especially those that play college football. UofL, they operate at a deficit of $12.5 million per year, and that is not fully accounting for the House settlement, which is an additional $20.5 million a year, because throughout this study, this came on halfway through. So that number is going to continue to get bigger. And because they have to operate at this deficit, we see things like $200 student fees for athletics, UofL taking out a $25 million loan of credit. Their reserve stock of money used to be $34 million. It's been drawn down to $3.4 million because they're just in the red. And Louisville, they come right out and they say, we can't do this forever. We can't operate at this deficit. It's not fair to UofL. It's not fair to the students. It's not fair to what we often forget, and something we're going to get into, the taxpayers of Kentucky, because these are state-funded institutions, which we'll get into that conversation. That's the fun one. Then you get into it. They even highlight Ohio State. They run at a deficit also. They lost $37 million last year. And
Ohio State, that was the one that, yeah, that's the one that like really grabbed me. I got my notes here. They generated Ohio State generated $255 million in revenue. They spent $320 million.
So continuing on with this, they highlight a lot of universities that money situations we are publicly known to be bad. So universities like Rutgers, Penn State, Florida State, they highlight those. And everyone knew that those were bad financial situations. It's been widely reported. Then they also talk a little bit about Texas. They set a new national record of $37.9 million in operating expenses. They carry $192 million of debt. They talk about Colorado. They are projected to have a $27 million deficit. And we think about Colorado, I mean, they haven't been great on the field, but every time we turn on Fox, it's Deion Sanders. You know, it's been the Deion Sanders show forever now. And it just really highlights that it doesn't matter what conference you're in. It doesn't matter how good you are at football. It doesn't matter how many alumni you have. Everyone is having money issues right now.
Yeah, it's not something that's just isolated. This isn't just isolated to, a smaller program or, an ACC thing or anything. I think that's the most humbling thing that I've gotten today. This is something that is just across the landscape. And I mean, I'll be completely honest. Like, I knew things were bad, but until like actually reading that today, it kind of just shocked me. It's like reading through that and actually like looking into other things. We're not nearly in as bad of a place as a lot of programs.
You're really not. I mean, you're not spending as much money as other programs, so your margin of deficit's a little bit different, but you're not in a good place here. We're talking about losing tens of millions of dollars every single year. You're not in a good place. At the same time, you're not in last place. And I don't think you're anywhere close to being in last place. So that's a good thing. It is. And it just highlights like this is across the board, man. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are. It's affecting you. Now, the next little section that we have is titled The Paradox of NIL and Revenue Sharing. There's a lot of good information in this one. So we get into it. UofL, they do the politically correct move in the year 2026, and they say, yes, we do think the students should make money. And I want to say thank you, UofL, for drawing such of a hard line in the sand in the year of 2026. Glad you think the students should get NIL. UofL, they support 23 sports, 14 women's sports, and 9 men's sports. Out of those 23 sports, how many of those sports do you think are revenue-generating sports, Maxwell?
I mean, I know, because I read, but I would say when I read it, it surprised me because I thought it would be double.
It used to be, hey, a few years ago it was double.
Yeah, it's 2. I thought it would be 4, to be completely honest. So, I thought you'd be able to sneak women's basketball in there. If anything, like run a ballpark like, net zero.
They lose a lot of money.
They do.
Women's basketball loses a lot of money. So yeah, it's 2 sports. It's football and men's basketball, obviously. And kind of like what I said previously. A couple of years ago, baseball was kind of teetering on the line. Women's basketball was solidly making money. Now, here's the thing. So, baseball loses about $4 million. Women's basketball loses over $4 million per year. Men's and women's swimming and diving and track dollar, $6 million each. So, yeah, what I wanted to have you noticed recently, a lot of states, the two that I've noticed off the top of my head have been Mississippi and Texas, are requiring their universities to make their numbers public for this is how much each program makes and this is how much each program loses.
Yeah. I have to say I'm a fan of that because, as you alluded to earlier, these programs, I mean, at the end of the day, these programs are still in some way, shape, or form being partially funded by tax dollars.
Yes.
So at the end of the day,
get into the hot political takes. Well, us as taxpayers, we want to see where our tax dollars go.
I mean, yeah, essentially, if I, no offense, but if I'm paying in taxes and I know that X amount of dollars is going to this school and I'm a 75-year-old man, and I've paid in my taxes my entire life, and this school posts a losing record every single season for the last 50 years, you have to have some legitimate conversations. I'm not saying what those conversations are, but those conversations are going to be had across the country.
I've been very curious to see when the state of Kentucky does this again. And this is my one disclaimer for the video. This is inherently a little bit political. Max and I have different political philosophies. We're not going to get into the Republican versus Democrat. We're not doing that. We're just simply talking about inherently political topics. So yeah, let's all act a little civil here.
And I will even say that unfortunately, we have hit a point, unfortunately, where we're having to talk politics on a sports pod.
Exactly. When we see these states have been releasing these numbers publicly, just being very truthful, a lot of these states are conservative majority states, whether that be through their state senates, governor, reps. It is what it is. That's what we see it at. Kentucky, even though we have a Democratic governor, the rest of the state's red. I'm really shocked that the state of Kentucky hasn't kind of mandated this yet. So that's why I really like seeing this from UofL's perspective of they didn't exactly outright say it, but they said it enough of what needed to be said about the state of each of their athletic programs and how much they bring in, how much they lose. I mean, based off of what they said in this article with the 60% for football, how negative some of these programs are, you can do the math yourself and be pretty dang close. You might be off a few $100,000 here or there, but it gets the point across for UofL. And we get to the point, and I don't want to be this person. Again, political, don't kill me for this. I don't want to be this person, but at a certain point when we are operating these taxpayer-funded institutions at such of a deficit, how can we make the argument for not cutting sports?
Or sliding sports over to a different model.
Yeah, and that might be what needs to happen for especially college football. Maybe college football needs to go to a different model so we can afford to have a women's swim and dive team.
Well, I think that you have literally college football makes the most sense, at least to begin with. I'm not saying college basketball does not make money. College basketball clearly makes money, clearly gets viewership, not to the extent of football, and that's been proven time and time again.
With all of this information coming out in the past few months, it doesn't make as much as you think.
It does not, no. But it's still
Don't get me wrong. Louisville, Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, Carolina, they're making money. They're making good money off college basketball. But the Ole Miss one is the one I'm going to highlight. Ole Miss lost money on men's basketball.
I want to be surprised about that, but I'm not, because at the end of the day, SEC schools, they can funnel as much money into basketball as they want. That's what we've seen the last 5 or 6 years. That's why you've seen this big boom in SEC basketball. They're funneling the money in. But at the same time, if the fans don't care about it as much as football, then it doesn't matter. Look at Alabama. Alabama was really good in basketball for a couple of years. They don't care.
I get that, but even an SEC program should make money off of college basketball. Theoretically,
yes.
In the Power Four should just be making money off of college basketball. I mean, I get it. You got a IUPUI or a Stony Brook, and they're running a deficit. I get that, but we start talking about major college basketball. I don't care if you're Ole Miss. I don't care if you're Nebraska. I don't care if you're Penn State. If you were some of these historically bad college basketball programs, you should be making some sort of money from this, from the amount of money that we all think is in college basketball.
I will say the one thing that this gets me, and I know we're probably going to talk about this, but just in that mindset, I think one of the worst things that's happened in the last couple of years, and it kind of correlates time wise with NIL coming out and all of these different changes, is the last round of restructuring within conferences, where this wasn't a thought when it was, North Carolina, they can go play Cal and Stanford,
I agree.
and vice versa. It wasn't a thought, because I don't think anyone thought we would be at the point we are at now. And that doesn't sound like they're going to play 2 games or 4 games or whatever. That's fine. But when you're talking about shuttling an entire team, an entire staff, your equipment, your managers, everything out there, that's millions of dollars. So I think that does correlate in with it.
And I just want to point out also, I think that is a massive issue. And the University of Louisville chose not to address that issue, which, take that as you will. That's their choice. They don't want to address the issue. That's an ACC issue. I mean, now it's an everybody issue with the way the conferences look. UofL chose not to take that route, which that's their call. Next little section, Louisville, they start proposing some solutions here on how to fix this deficit. The very first thing that they come out and say is congressional action is needed. That's their first thing.
I understand where they're coming from on it, because right now you're running a model that essentially has 30, that's running off 30 small models, 30 plus. I mean, essentially each state is having their own model, saying we're going to run it like this, we're going to have our own rules, but it's affecting the entire national landscape of things.
Yes.
So if you're not following it, I guess that's like the short answer on why it's such a big deal. You have too much going on.
Yeah, inherently, and this might be my politics showing, so I apologize. I believe since these are state-funded institutions, therefore being taxpayer-funded institutions, with the state that this has gotten to, I don't know how in good conscience we can continue to spend taxpayer dollars like this. And I know a lot of people will say, the government, the worst words you can hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I get that, but this is well past the point of like Congress saying, the NCAA needs to reshape. This is, hey, we have to change this model for the taxpayers.
Yeah, it's gotten to a point where it's not just affecting a school, it's not just affecting sports, but it actually affects Meemaw, that has never watched a college football or basketball game in her life, when her tax dollars are being spent to fund these programs running at a deficit year after year now.
One could argue these are government services. There ain't a lot of government services that are going to run at multiple tens of $millions of deficits inside the states. Now, welfare type programs, those type of programs, yes, that is inherently what they're designed for. But like Kentucky Department of Transportation, they're not going to run for that sort of deficit. If they do, there's going to be massive shakeups in the Kentucky Department of Transportation. But getting into this, with UofL, they this is where it gets a little interesting for me, how UofL argues this. So UofL, they define the SCORE Act and the SAFE Act, which are 2 different acts trying to be pushed through Congress. They look to do a little bit of different things. The SCORE Act is the Student Compensation and Opportunity Through Rights and Endorsements Act. That addresses a lot of like governance issues inside the NCAA, eligibility, yada, yada, yada. Personally, I don't think the SCORE Act does enough. I think it's a good starting point, but it doesn't do enough. Then UofL goes ahead and they highlight the SAFE Act. The SAFE Act is the Student Athlete Fairness and Enforcement. It does all the same thing the SCORE Act does, but it also proposes an amendment to the Sports Broadcasting Act. The Sports Broadcasting Act, by the way, it was signed in 1961. It granted professional sports leagues, including the NFL, an antitrust exemption that allows the league to bundle and sell the television rights of all of their franchises collectively. That's why you don't see things like the NFC exclusively on Fox. It's just, that's why you don't see it.
Essentially gives them the right to run a monopoly.
Yeah. Louisville argues that they kind of fall more in line with the SAFE Act, where the SAFE Act allows collective bargaining of media rights. Instead of the ACC selling to ESPN, it's all of Division I selling to ESPN. And then that money is pulled together and then distributed through whatever model or whatever governance institution. What's really interesting to me about this, the SCORE Act has really been pushed very hard by the SEC. The SAFE Act has been pushed really hard by the Big 12 and the ACC, and partially pushed by the Big 10. I'm not over reading into it, and this isn't the conversation to be taking away from this document. But seeing Louisville kind of fall in line a little bit to some of the Big Ten, and along with that, the financial numbers they have specifically from the Big Ten is definitely something that you just kind of put in your back pocket to think about later on. U of L, they finish up just talking about, hey, we just want congressional action. We don't know exactly what we want. These are the acts going through. We kind of prefer a mix of both, but we more so lean towards the SAFE Act. Anything else to add, Maxwell?
I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with it. I mean, I wrote down the real question that I got, at least from their finale there was, it's not how you're not trying to say what college sports was. You're literally trying to decide what it should become and how you build it off off of a new model. Like the college sports that we had, I mean, realistically, 6-7 years ago, that doesn't exist anymore. It's never going to exist anymore. We're essentially just in a limbo phase, in my opinion, where you've got to figure out where it's going to be at in 10 years. And I genuinely do think that, college sports as a whole, not just football, basketball, but, softball and track and field and stuff, if something's not done, you're going to lose a lot of those collegiate sports.
Yes.
And I don't want to see that happen.
So now Louisville starts talking about a fun topic to U of L, governing bodies. To the surprise of no one, the University of Louisville is not a huge fan of the NCAA. I don't know why. I don't know why at all. But they don't like the NCAA a whole lot. They start off clearly defined. This is the NCAA and this is the CSC. For those of you that don't know, the CSC is the College Sports Commission. That is more so ran by the conferences. The NCAA is ran by the member institutions. I don't think I have to explain a lot of NCAA stuff to Louisville fans, but just so we're all on the same page. We know our way around NCAA guidelines, all right? So the College Sports Commission is kind of the new kid on the block. It was made in the wake of the House settlement, and they come straight out and they say, hey, the CSC is a really good idea. It hits constant roadblocks through lawsuits, through even the NCAA, through the member institutions or the members of the conferences that make up the CSC. And, they say, we like the CSC. We think it's a really good idea. And they want to point out that there's been no true enforcement from either the CSC or the NCAA on hard spending of $20.5 million House settlement money, inclusive revenue sharing, or even the NIL deals that have to go through the Dilotti process. There's been zero, according to U of L.
I think that, with anything, whether you look at it with business or, can get into politics, whatever, but anytime there's something new and you've already got some, a very powerful entity, say the NCAA sitting over it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, a lot of those roadblocks are going to be brought up just so it's almost like a protective state.
I mean, I'll be honest, I wasn't that surprised to find out that U of L doesn't like the NCAA and they want to like the CSC. Like, that doesn't surprise me at all.
No, not at all.
So what U of L proposes is they propose that Congress starts a new chartered governing body for college athletics. They do not know what it looks like, but they propose that Congress does, and that the new governing body should have standards for gender equality. They need to ensure a sustainable balance between revenue and non-revenue sports, along with preserve the Olympic sport model. I'm going to be honest, that sounds like the NCAA.
What I take from that personally is, yes, it sounds like the NCAA, but it's essentially, I kind of take it as like, it's almost like throwing shade. Like the NCAA is, it's arcane. It doesn't serve its purpose anymore. And, I agree with that. I don't think the NCAA, I mean, we've seen it time and time again where, an athlete's ruled ineligible, they can go to their local judge and, become ineligible again. At what point in time do you look at it and say the NCAA is not the backbone? Because I think we've crossed that line.
Yeah. And essentially, that's what U of L further argues, is that the NCAA is not able to enforce its rules. It's ran poorly. It has not kept up with the changing landscape of college athletics. They want whatever new entity that comes out to have clearly defined eligibility limits. Interestingly enough, though, the University of Louisville wants a cutoff of 23 years old for eligibility.
Seeing that, I was actually going to bring that up if you didn't. Yeah, the fact that they actually highlight 18 to 23-year-old collegiate experience and a reasonable constraints on transfers.
Yes.
They go on to say that it would promote academic continuity, which I do agree, because we've also seen time and time again covering the transfer portal where a player goes from one school to another, to another, to another, and all of a sudden they can't play because the academics aren't lining up, because this class isn't honored, or this class from school number 2 isn't honored at school number 4.
I mean, let's be honest. Guys leaving Louisville have had that problem.
100%.
And that's not me throwing shade at the university either. It's just
When you're flipping that like that, I think it plays out the exact same way in your life, my life, and any, person that's, had a long-term career. If you go through and changing jobs every year, you're going to run into the same thing. You're eventually going to get to a job where you have to do something that you're not qualified on because you should have been qualified on that 4 years ago and you weren't. I think that's just part of what happens when it's been able to run like it has.
Yes. Up next on the docket, UofL, they start talking about the spending cap and enforcement of a spending cap. Before we get into this, and I give UofL's take, I ran a poll on Twitter before we came on here with our viewership. And I asked, in a theoretical scenario where teams could abide by a cap, should there be an NIL cap? 74% of people that answered said yes, and it should be an equal cap. 8% of people said yes, but it should be a per conference cap. And 18% of people said no. So I'm going to be honest with you before we get into this. I'll give my spiel.
Shoot.
I'm in the 8%. I think it should be by per conference. Pause, though.
I agree. I mean, I don't think you can expect the Sun Belt to have the same cap as the FCC.
Unless we get into like the SAFE Act territory where everyone's getting the same equal amount of TV money. If we're doing that, yeah, it should be equal. But with the way things are currently set up, it's not fair to the Sun Belt to make them spend as much money as the SEC. It's not fair to the SEC to make them spend as much money as the ACC. Just being very brutally honest. Because at that point, we are just making money off of college athletics, hand over fist. And that's equally as bad of an issue to have than losing money hand over fist. So what UofL argues, UofL kind of explains what a spending cap is. They highlight the NFL's model of a spending cap. I'm shocked they didn't go for the MLB. That's weird. Not like there's about to be a labor dispute or anything. They highlight the NFL's spending cap model. They personally think that there should be a hard and enforceable cap on how much NIL money you can spend per sport. Does not matter what conference you're in. They argue that without a hard and enforceable cap, the current trajectory is a clear and small number of programs will spend whatever it takes to dominate. The middle class of college athletics will hollow out and hundreds of programs will be forced to cut sports. I agree to them. I would argue that's what's currently happening. At the same time, and I'm sorry if this is my politics kind of pushing through a little bit. If you have the money, you might as well be able to spend it. Because again, I don't think it's fair to hamstring Texas because Texas State can't spend the same type of.
Yeah, but I think that's where you get back to, I think the best outline is by conference. Because at least I think for the most part, you have, most SEC schools are going to be able to be competitive, at least in the same territory. Big Ten school. Like, I think once you get into your conferences, those schools are like enough that you can put forward something realistic, in my opinion.
To finish it up, they argue that established cap is not a cap on what individual student athletes could make. They want to try to, make it as fair as possible, regardless of gender lines. I'll be completely honest with you also, and this is kind of where I come from with it. Let's say you do put a cap in place. Well, you're not going to get a collective bargaining agreement from the students. So you are theoretically telling people, hey, we are limiting how much money you can make. And then we get in, and we're not going to touch this subject because we're not going down this road, Max. We're not going to touch this subject at all. You get into some potential Title IX issues. We're going to move on after that.
Yeah.
Finishing up, Louisville's commitment. This is their final little part of the article. Their little fluff piece. UofL wants to be committed to being a part of the solution. They're going to advocate for structural reform that has the potential to create a unified governance structure, blah, 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 blah. They're going to continue to invest in academics, athletics, and personal development of every Cardinal student athlete. They make I think what they say at the end, it kind of hits home the most. If we fail to act, the enterprise that generates $1.28 billion a year for the Louisville economy, that provides life-changing opportunities for hundreds of young people, and that binds our community together will be diminished beyond recognition.
I think the next section hits home hard as well.
Send it. Let's hear it.
Well, as I said, that's like the personal note. I feel like the next part is just the realistic plea. They bring up the time for incremental thinking has passed, and I agree with that. They go on, college athletic needs structure reform and needs it now. I take that as we're not just standing here to talk, just to talk. This is, they're pointing out the problem is now. The problem is past, really. Something needs to be done now. What that is, I guess, is as good as mine, but I think they're kind of at that as well. And it's not their place to say this is what needs to be done. I think the big thing with this is, they went through, they highlighted deficiencies across the system, highlighted a couple solutions, whether it be the NFL model, things like that. It's, the one that hit most is the time is now, and I agree.
Yeah. And then just to kind of finish this off, if you have any experience at all with academic white papers or corporate white papers or military white pages or anything of the source, you have your references at the bottom. If you enjoy this kind of stuff, I would highly suggest checking out the references because there's a lot of good stuff in there. It is absolutely fucking hilarious, though, that they one of the references is a message board, 11 Warriors. I thought that was fucking hilarious. I was like, okay, we're referencing messages boards now in our very official white page. But I was like, okay. Like,
get some good information off of boards.
Kind of wrapping up the conversation, though. Again, this will all be posted down below, so please actually read the article. Don't just take our word for it. I can't suggest that enough. What is your biggest takeaway from this, both U of L focused and nationally focused?
My biggest takeaway, it kind of goes back to that last. It's advocating for something now. It's not wait, because the longer we wait, the worse this gets. It's advocating, to come together and actually solve the problem before it gets worse, before programs have to shut down. So that's what I read out of that, between the lines. And we've already started to see it in some smaller schools across the country having to get rid of, the Olympic sport programs and stuff. And that's just something I don't want to see, because granted, we don't cover track and field stuff as much as, we do football and basketball and things like that.
We don't cover it at all, Matt.
Yeah, at all. Yes, we don't cover that. But at the same time, like, that does not mean that we want to see those programs disappear.
Yes.
Like, we still care about those programs. I want to see, Louisville's track and field succeed. Like, those programs matter. I don't want to see those shut down, but I do think on the track we're on, we're getting dangerously close to seeing those shutter rapidly. And I'm not saying at Louisville, but I'm just saying across the board.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway for U of L is I knew football made a lot of money. Yeah. I didn't know U of L football made that much money. I knew it was a lot. I didn't know it was generating that kind of money, especially for the city of Louisville. That's pretty crazy to me. Nationally, it's across the board, man. And like when you start in your page, when you start throwing out Ohio States, Penn States, Texas's, it's across the board. It doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter what level of football you play, what level of basketball you play, what conference you're in. It is across the board. This white page highlighted at least one school from each of the power conferences. And it's a school that we think of traditionally being fairly good at football. And I mean, I'll be honest, I think I already felt this way before reading the article. I feel this way even more now. I really think that, and I know right now might not be the best time to talk about it. I think Congress needs to act on college sports.
Yeah, I think you're getting to a point. Like, I think the days of, the beginning of NIL where your billion dollar booster is holding your program up, I think that is starting to fade. Like, that is not sustainable. We're seeing that real time. So something has to be put in place if we want college sports as a whole to remain in 10, 15 years.
Yeah. But Max, I think a little bit of a longer conversation, a little bit dry, good conversation though. We need to have these conversations every once in a while. I think it's going to wrap us up for today.
Absolutely.
With that being said, if you enjoyed this conversation and you want to see more of it, go ahead, subscribe down below, please. Leave us a comment below. Do you think Congress should get involved with college athletics? Please send this to one of your friends, all that good stuff. Give us a thumbs up. Really helps us in the algorithm. And we will catch you guys next time talking a little Louisville football on the page. See you around and go Cards.